Presented by RomulusIT.com, offering remote support for common computer problems.
I wanted to ask you about, because we're telling stories here effectively. Earlier you had mentioned Motorhead. I got to see them a couple times when they were still around, but I remember probably around 2012 or 2013. I got to see them at Download while I was living out there at that point in time, and I remember Lemmy was already starting to look quite frail, and I know that you have a massive appreciation for that band. Was the general community aware that he was, sort of on his last legs at that point in time, or what was sort of the feeling when he was starting to get quite ill?
No, he wasn't really that ill yet at that point. He wasn't as healthy as he had been, but no, he was, he was kind of he had been diagnosed with diabetes at some point, if I remember correctly. So, he was battling that. And I remember there was like kind of a constant, I remember at some point when Lemmy switched to vodka, like that was news.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
okay.
in the rock world, that was like a major headline news. So I remember hearing that, like, Lemmy's got diabetes and no more Jack and Cokes to the sugar content. He switched to vodka. I was like, wow, like after 50 years, that's a big deal. But yeah, look, when a guy like that hits the wall after, living the life that he had been living since he was a teenager, you're talking a guy had been hitting it hard for 50 odd years already, by the time the early 2000 teens rolled in. So, eventually you're going to hit the wall. Yeah. I don't care who you are. Everyone hits the wall, and no matter how healthy you are, and no matter how fucked up of a life you've led, how hard you live, and when you've lived as hard as Lemmy did, when you hit the wall, it's going to be worse than the average human. And look, I did spend a lot of time with him over the years. Lucky enough, for me, it was a privilege to have spent almost 30 odd years or something knowing him, and being friendly with him. And I asked him, I asked him one time about smoking, and you think you'll ever quit or this or that. These are questions he just, there wasn't even an answer to.
Didn't contemplate.
He wasn't going to quit smoking.
Right.
He wasn't going to quit drinking. I mean, I have a story that's too long for this podcast right now, but I mean, he literally almost like lost a couple of toes because when he was in the throes of like figuring out the diabetes and all that, a couple of his toes went black from bad circulation and all this. And he saw some doctor in LA, and they were like, "Oh, we immediately, you're gonna lose the toes and this and that." And he's like, "I need a second opinion." And he flew back to like London and saw a doctor there, and it was like same kind of thing. We need to get these off. It's like an emergency. And it comes to, he's literally like, he goes to have the surgery done, and he's sitting in this office, and he's smoking a cigarette, and someone tells him, "You're not allowed to smoke in here. What are you, crazy? You can't smoke in this office." And he said, "Well, if I'm going to fucking lose a toe, I'm going to have a fucking cigarette." And long story short, they said, "You can't smoke in here." He said, "Well, then I won't be in here." And he left. He ends up seeing another doctor, and they literally like told him, "You just need to change this or this in your diet, and your feet are going to be fine." And he changed his diet, and he didn't have to have his toes cut off. So a cigarette literally saved him from having, part of his body amputated.
That's interesting. I'm going to use that as a segue, because you had mentioned him switching to vodka. And I mean, it's quite topical.
That might have been if I talked to some of my circle of friends, especially the person who actually relayed that tale to me, that might have actually been when he switched to vodka. Or, no. It wasn't when he switched to vodka. That's when he started using Diet Coke instead of regular Coke in his Jack and Cokes, I believe.
Fair.
The doctor literally told him, switch to Diet Coke, and you don't have to lose your toes.
Fair enough.
This episode is brought to you by Romulus IT, offering fast, affordable remote support for common computer problems, including troubleshooting, health checks, virus removal, and software support. Visit RomulusIT.com to get your computer back on track.